centuries. You don't know where you land. It's so dark in mythology. Treasures of history to be found. Hear the legends of time. All the handiworks remain. Only the dream away. Orion, 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 Orion,
Doctor Who Season 17 ran from the 1st of September 1979 until the 12th of January 1980. Mary Tam chose not to return as Romana, so rather than have her leave off-screen, the production crew made use of the fact that she was a Time Lord and regenerated her off-screen. There's a very subtle difference. They didn't need to come up with a new character name. She didn't trip over a brick or get hit by a car or anything. She just decided to regenerate. And because Douglas Adams was in charge, that means hilarity. Yes, hilarity, as Romana regenerates into multiple forms, gets the Doctor's opinion on each of them, and finally chooses one he can live with. That of Princess Astra.
But you can't wear that body.
I thought it looked very nice on the princess.
But you can't go around wearing copies of bodies.
Why not? We're not going back to Atrius, are we?
No!
Well then.
Now, this scene has led to the creation of many theories and even more questions, but I'm not going to go into them here. This is the new Romana. Deal with it. K9 also has a new voice because John Leeson didn't come back this season. He's been replaced by David Brierley. The first story of the season is the 4-part Destiny of the Daleks. The last Doctor Who script credited to Dalek creator Terry Nation. There were serious issues because of additions and changes Douglas Adams made to the script, and by the time Douglas Adams had left the show, Terry Nation had moved to California and was too busy to work on Doctor Who again. What's going on is the Doctor and Romana get involved in a war between the Daleks and the Movellans. The Movellans are an ultra-logical race of battle-hardened disco robots. Not to be snide here, but if logic told them that looking like futuristic drag queens would help bring them victory, then their logic would appear to be flawed.
Our species are similar, though your design is inelegant. Daleks have no concept of elegance. This is obvious.
The Movellans and the Daleks have been at a stalemate for centuries because they're both creatures of pure logic, and therefore unable to outthink each other. Yes, the Daleks. Pure logic. You know, I'm pretty sure that everyone involved in this story had at least heard of the Daleks before, but from that concept you wouldn't know it. Daleks are about as logical as Alec Baldwin face to face with a gay photographer. They're powered by malice, rage, and fear. So, first problem with this story. It really should have been a Cyberman story. Sure, they're not a perfect fit with the ultra-logical thing either, but at least they're supposed to be logical. Anyway, the Daleks have decided to reanimate Davros from cryogenic suspension so we can win the war for them. Even though Davros was killed at the end of Genesis of the Daleks.
Just a flesh wound.
And how does Davros intend to win the war? Well, a few things. Like Dalek suicide bombers. I really like Destiny of the Daleks. It's stupid as hell, but it's the fun kind of stupid. The Movellans are one of the most ridiculous-looking races ever seen in the series, and it's beautiful that for once it's not down to the special effects. It's all costume, but I like to think that's because the costume designer put all their talent into Romana's amazing outfit. I fucking love it. Davros is played by David Goodison, and he gives the single worst Davros performance of all time.
In the history of the universe, this moment is unique. Davros lives.
Yes, I can see your long rest hasn't done anything to cure your megalomania. Have a jelly, baby.
In fact, he's the only not fucking brilliant Davros the show has ever had. So, congratulations. The next story is the 4-part City of Death. This was the first story to film outside the UK. They had 4 days of location filming in Paris. This is considered the Graham Williams and Douglas Adams era masterpiece, and for the most part, it's well deserved. The script is very witty and clever.
My dear, I don't think he's as stupid as he seems.
My dear, nobody could be as stupid as he seems.
An alien called Skaroth was trapped in an explosion on primordial Earth millions of years ago. Even though, for the story to make sense, it really should be billions of years ago. Anyway, years and years ago, there was an explosion and Skaroth was splintered throughout time into exact replicas of himself. Each is in a different time, and they all work together throughout history to make sure the present-day incarnation has the money needed for time travel experiments so he can eventually go back in time and save himself. Now usually that wouldn't be a problem, but Scaroth's been breaking the law, killing people, and if he succeeds, then all life on Earth will be wiped out. So he's gotta be stopped. Stopped by the Doctor, Romana, and a one-man punching machine / Tintin lookalike called Duggan. The guest cast is uniformly great. Scaroth is played by Julian Glover from The Crusade, and Indiana Jones in The Last Crusade. And his wife is played by Catherine Schell from Space 1999. Episode 4 attained the single largest audience for any episode of Doctor Who, with 16 million viewers. It's impressive, but remember there was no recording episodes, no iPlayer, no torrenting, no DVDs, and there were only 3 TV channels, and one of them was on strike at the time. So bigger audiences than today were to be expected. Now, for all the witty, quotable lines, clever ideas and great performances, this has some really basic problems. The biggest one is when Scaroth reveals that he's not a human, by tearing off his human mask and revealing his real head, which is obviously much larger than the mask, and has a single eye right where he couldn't see out of. This is the story where John Cleese turns up visiting the Louvre. Possibly playing himself, I'm not really sure.
And since it has no call to be here, the art lies in the fact that it is here.
This story is the best that this version of Doctor Who had to offer. High concept sci-fi comedy at its best. And from that we go down a bit, in The Creature from the Pit. This could easily be the worst story of the season. All the elements are right there. The story is stupid, the characters are ridiculous, the setting is laughable, and Romana looks like half of ABBA crossed with a Christmas cracker. But a few things save it. 1. Some of the comedy actually works. One of my favourite Tom Baker moments is when he's thrown into the pit and attempts to climb back out with the aid of a mountaineering book.
It's in Tibetan.
But your mileage may vary in how funny that is. The second thing is Tom Baker's reaction to the creature's design. He's trying to communicate with it, and then this. Wonderful. I'm one of the few who really likes the creature's design. It's very alien, and when it comes to blowjob jokes in Doctor Who, I am very forgiving. The third thing that saves it from being the worst story of the season is the presence of the Horns of Nimon later on. The TARDIS is landed on the planet Chloris, rich in plant life but poor in metal. The ruler, Lady Adrasta, controls all the metal and uses a giant creature in a pit to maintain order. And within 4 episodes, she's been dethroned in a rebellion. Very typical and not that great. The Nightmare of Eden is at least interesting and fairly unique. The TARDIS ends up in a luxury space liner. They meet up with a scientist who's brought a machine that he claims makes detailed records about the planets he's visited. Of course it turns out to be something more like the viewing device that the Doctor and Jo got trapped inside during Carnival of Monsters. And after there's a spaceship crash, the device releases some pretty silly monsters called mandrills. Also on board, someone is smuggling a very addictive space drug. And it's totally connected to the machine and the mandrills, but I'm not going to tell you how. Just know it's unusual. This is the story that pretty much ended this era, even though there's still 1 or 2 to go. Literally, 1 or 2 depending on how you see it. Anyway, this is the story that ended the Graham Williams era. The production and filming for it was so stressful that the director walked off the set after clashes with Tom Baker. Graham Williams took his place and shortly afterwards resigned as producer. This is fairly average for season 17, meaning it's below average overall. The Horns of Nimon is the last story of the season, but not the last one I'll talk about. It's 4 episodes long and it's basically the Underwater Menace 2, Menace Harder. It's got ancient Greek crap, an insane plot, and a villain that rivals Zaroff when it comes to over-the-top acting.
My dreams of conquest! You have brought this calamity upon me!
That guy was offered the role of the Doctor before Tom Baker, and he turned it down. Just saying. This starts off as Theseus and the Minotaur in space, and then it mostly stays as Theseus and the Minotaur in space, with slight story alterations such as the Minotaur being a Nimon, one of a race of parasitic aliens that want to create an intergalactic empire and eat people's souls. The Minotaur in the God Complex was mentioned as being related to the Nimon. I don't know if that was another attempt to get name recognition without paying the original creators, but how the Minotaur acted was pretty Nimonish. This was the last story that composer Dudley Simpson worked on. He was a regular in the show for many, many years. He pretty much invented the sound of the show for the 70s. Whenever you heard the weird, moody music that sometimes barely sounded like music, that was usually Dudley Simpson. This is one of the classically bad stories, and even the production team knew it. They weren't too worried though. No season can be perfect, and the season finale was coming. An epic 6-parter filming on location in Cambridge University. It'd feature boating, a Time Lord prison, mind-sucking orbs, and a ship that becomes the Doctor's biggest fan. Then the production strike happened, with literally days of recording left to do. All the location work was finished, and big chunks of the studio stuff. This left Shada a half-finished story, but bizarrely a half-finished story that has more life than some of the finished ones. It was released on VHS, with linking material of Tom Baker explaining what happened in the missing scenes. Superfan Ian Levine commissioned his own animated reconstruction, which is arguably better than some of the BBC's commissioned animated reconstructions of missing stories. There's a flash animation where the 8th Doctor remembers that he forgot to do something in the late 70s, and so grabs Time Lord President Romana, and they finish the adventure together. And finally, there's a book adaptation by Gareth Roberts, who wrote the Shakespeare Code, that introduces new Who elements, such as guest character Claire being an incarnation of Clara in the Doctor's time stream. If you take the last one as canon, then it opens up a disturbing possibility. What if what we saw in the unfinished show was how things were before the Great Intelligence and Clara entered the time stream, and the book was afterwards? What if Clara replaced people who had previously existed, ending their lives before they were born and living their lives for them? I wonder what other characters from the classic show didn't exist after that. Myself, I prefer the 8th Doctor and Romana version, but the book does bring up questions. If the story was finished, I expect it would have been the second best story of the season. I'm pretty sure it would have been No City of Death, but it's also pretty far from a Horns of Nimon or Creature from the Pit. So that's it for Season 17. A mostly not great year with one obvious, huge, fucking high point. Both Douglas Adams and Graham Williams left once the season was completed, leaving John Nathan Turner to take over, and he'd bring the show's second biggest facelift with him. It's not quite as big as when 3 arrived, but it's not that far off. Join me next time when we'll see Romana and K9 depart and the Doctor regenerate. We'll meet the least popular companion thus far, and an old adversary will return.